I'm Elisa Parker. This is the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, where we've been celebrating this event for 17 years now. We're based at the Sierras. Several thousand people come to our little towns here. I call them our everyday environmental action heroes. I'm excited today to feature Rob Herring. He's the filmmaker of The Need to Grow. We've been talking a lot over the Wild and Scenic series around our plant life, the nutrients that are required for the plant life to grow, and actually how that's integrated to our lives as human beings too. The Need to Grow is about soil.
Yeah.
Right, Rob?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here.
Like you say, it is a cyclical process, right? It's all connected. So for us, as filmmakers, I think that our passion started around food system from a personal health perspective. For me and my co-director, Ryan Wyrick, I studied nutrition, and he was about to have a kid, and we really started looking at the food system as how it affects us, right, in our personal health. Nutrient density, obviously exposure to toxins, pesticides, herbicides, and these kinds of things. And then as time went on, we became pretty strong activists in the food movement, particularly around genetically modified foods and what that's doing to not only our landscape, but to our bodies. We saw a lot of people that were really frustrated with the situation, rightly so. There's a lot of anger and a lot of people getting depressed at how overwhelming the situation can feel.
Right.
So for us, we wanted to make a film that focused on solutions as much as we could. That was sort of the impetus. The overwhelming, even more overwhelming stat that we learned was right when we started the film, there was a UN report that said we had 60 years of farmable soil left on the planet.
60 years of farmable soil. And can you explain to everyone the difference between soil and dirt?
Yeah, great point.
Because people might walk around and say, we've got lots of dirt here on planet Earth.
Sure, yeah. It's something that maybe, not a lot of people really think about. And the difference there is really just the difference between life or the absence of life. And what that means for soil is really microbial life. So there are billions of microbes happening, beyond what we can see. There are certain organisms in the soil, like earthworms, that we can obviously, get a good look at. But in a piece of soil the size of, my pinky, there could be billions upon billions. In about a handful of soil, there will be more organisms in there than people on the planet. So what's going on there? And soil scientists will admit they can only scratch the surface of the complexity. So it's tens of thousands of different species, and they're each, cohabitating. Is that even a word? I just made up a word. Cohabitating.
No, you can cohabitate. I'm sure these micronutrients cohabitate with each other in some way or another.
Coming up with words, but it's the way that they share nutrients and move nutrients, and then how they work with the plants. So one great line in the film by one of the amazing farmers that we discovered and followed was, we have to think about feeding the soil, not feeding the plant.
Right.
And plants are really just a byproduct of healthy soil. Another one of our mentors and another guy who's featured in the film is a permaculture expert, Larry Santoyo, and one of his lines is, we're not gardeners, we're soil managers. And dirt has been stripped of that life. And when the life goes, the minerals can go. And it's a very clear difference in how it absorbs water and what kind of food it grows.
And we see this in I'm calling it like a monoculture. And growing, which if you're going down in the Central Valley in California and you see they're just growing one type of vegetable or, an almond farm or corn. And it doesn't have the diversity that healthy soil would necessarily have. And so what happens, right, is it gets eventually that soil gets stripped away.
Yeah, so that system is not how nature intended, obviously. Beyond just having, the lack of diversity in a crop or a plant, it's really that genetic diversity that is missing. So we have actually the same, particularly in genetically modified foods. So some of our biggest crops are corn and soy, and we just have them planted as far as the eye can see.
Right.
They're used in so many different food products, but that genetic diversity is lacking, and that leaves the food system vulnerable, beyond all the other problems of polluting and going downstream. So in rainstorms in California, you can get a really good idea of the difference between soil health in that conventional farm will just have, you'll see the dirt flowing away with the water system, and it's going to carry with it all of the toxins that they sprayed on the farm. That's going to pollute further down the waterways. Whereas healthy soil is really going to infiltrate water, and the water that does make its way out is clear because it's not stripping anything away.
Right.
So it's keeping those nutrients in the soil, and the real key to do that is the life in the soil.
So the film is The Need to Grow. What are some of the solutions to ensuring that we have healthy soil, that we have soil like beyond 60 years?
Yeah, so our film really took on a life of its own as we started to discover these interesting stories around the country. And we landed on 3 different stories that I kind of see almost as a Goldilocks of setup of 3 different stages and scales of solutions. So one story is Elisa Parker, who's 6 years old at the youngest footage that we see, and we actually follow her to about the age of 10. And she's doing a lot of activism from a really young age. Giving a TED Talk, she starts a petition to get GMOs out of Girl Scout cookies. And we sort of follow her adventure and see what she does in her community. She starts a school garden, she starts a seed library to protect diversity. And she's kind of the representation of what anyone can do. They're composting. That's a great solution for the everyday person, I'd say,
Right.
is thinking of your food scraps as not going to landfill, creating methane, nitrous oxide, and CO2. But how do we put those back in the soil? So composting, huge solution. Then we have our urban farmer who is growing more food in a smaller space than anybody we ever saw. And it's that nutrient density that you were talking about. When you eat food that's grown that way, it's a completely different taste and experience. And then the biggest scale is this visionary inventor who's got quite an interesting history in his inventions through pop culture that had to do with music and video games and animation technologies. And he started applying it to natural systems. So this really astounding, one-of-a-kind green powerhouse system that we found in Montana really became the main storyline of the film, because he's able to do processes in his system over about 3 to 4 days, what could normally take hundreds of years.
Wow.
In
Wow.
returning really vital components to soil. And that's a huge one that
That's
we're excited
incredible.
about.
So you feel hopeful? Somewhat hopeful?
You have to,
Little bit?
you know, as environmentalists, I think we all go through the initial stage of feeling overwhelmed. I've kind of arrived at there's nothing other than having to take action. Whether or not you're hopeful about where it will go, you go back and forth. Is it too late? Is it not? The statistics.
We are where we are right now.
Exactly.
So we got to do what we got to do.
So how do
In this moment.
How do we keep fighting? How do we engage the everyday person in some way? Get them invited into the conversation.
And this passion and interest has taken you in all kinds of fascinating areas now. What's been like the wildest thing that's happened to you so far, especially around making a difference?
Yeah, before I did this film, I was doing a lot of music, and I wrote a song about genetically modified food before anyone was really talking about this issue, and I worked on the campaign to get GMOs labeled in California. And so I met a lot of the great instigators of that movement.
Before it was even like at
No,
this
everyone
time,
thought
right?
I was absolutely nuts talking about what a GMO was. And so that's why I was like, I need to write a song to sort of make it a little more accessible for people to hear some of this information. And after writing that song, which I was really hesitant to show anyone because it was just so different.
Right, and different.
And people in that movement just needed it and loved it. And so doors started opening for me to play at conferences and conventions. Before you know it, one of the wilder things I headlined a concert in Berlin for about 25,000 people.
That's awesome.
Right in the heart of Berlin.
That's awesome, right?
And it didn't really make sense to me
At
why
the
I was
moment,
there.
right?
But it
But
led
you were.
to a whole
That's
a whole
how
bunch of
life
other
is.
things.
You never know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
especially when you're in that zone. You never know what's going to happen at Wild and Scenic. Rob Herring, the film is called The Need to Grow. And it was a pleasure having you here today. Thanks so much for joining us both here and at the festival at large,
It's a
Rob.
pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm Elisa Parker. We'll have more stories like Rob's